Hi, I'm Disbrew, and today we're talking about the mess that Battlefield 2042 is in, and since it's released, gamers have basically agreed on one thing. In fact, in the 5 days it's been released, it's broken some records, none of which it wanted to, such as being one of Steam's worst reviewed games of all time, or Metacritic's 8th worst reviewed game of all time. These are not awards that I think any game wants to meet, but it's now got that honour. Now, I agree that it's got problems. I just tend to disagree with other people what the problems are. A lot of gamers are saying this, it's just not ready, and if it had a year's extra development, it could have been fixed. I don't think it could. My problems that I've had with the game have stayed the same since beta. The map design is awful. They're far too big, far too empty. And just because you've doubled the player count doesn't mean you need to make stupidly sized maps. And the balance of vehicles is off, and these remain the same for me into Battlefield 2042. Apart from that, I haven't had many issues. A lot of people complain about performance and bugs, and I don't tend to see them, although the time that I've spent in the game has largely been in Portal mode, simply because I really enjoy the map design of Bad Company 2, so that's what I've been playing. Just the thought of logging onto Battlefield 2042 to play the actual new maps, and I kind of just don't want to log in. But it was surprising a couple of days ago when there was another story that started to go around, that Battlefield 2042 may be one of the worst reviewed games, and yet it was still one of the most played, and this was backed up by a couple of other places. In fact, Nappen here actually showed the Steam charts where he showed the player base, and even though it was literally one of the worst reviewed of all time, it was still in the top 10 most played at 85,000, and there was a small drop of 15k from its peak on its first day, but apart from that, it was looking pretty good. But this was on November the 22nd, 2 days ago, and yeah, the story's changed now. Here it is. We're down to 45,000 from 85,000. 5 days since it was released, it's lost half of its players. And that, as you could just see, that dramatic drop, it kind of kept them on the second day, which is when the narrative went around, but then just plummeted off the face of the earth. But as you can see, on Steam, it has mostly negative reviews. In fact, only 28% of the reviews were actually positive. So out of the 44,000, about 30,000 reviews were negative. And they weren't just calm reviews. These things slanted it, and they gave their reasons why. You had incredibly insightful reviews, like this one from Rusko, where he says, read someone else's review. And other people were simply saluting the wasted money that they had on a game that they sometimes literally couldn't play. And a lot of the others I do agree with, like the maps are way too big, helis, hoverboats, and tanks are just too beefy, RPGs do no damage, and I'd also argue that the AA rockets are completely useless, and it's exactly the same comment I had in beta, but here we are. But the strange thing is some of the other issues that I don't have, and yet I keep seeing cropping up all over the place, and that is the performance of the game. Because my performance is fine, but a lot of other people just say it isn't. Now, this is a guy with a really decent processor and a decent GPU as well, 2080 Ti. It's like top of the range of the last generation. It really shouldn't be struggling, and yet it's on 50 FPS. And when you go into his settings, he's like, okay, so he was playing widescreen 1440, but then he dropped to 1080, and it barely changed his settings. And this seems to be a problem with a lot of people. They just can't get a certain limit. In fact, even with me, I get around 90 FPS, but I can't get higher than that, really. It doesn't really matter what I do to the settings, it doesn't go above that limit. But the thing with me is I'm getting 90 FPS, double his with a similar setup, except I'm playing near 4K. I shouldn't be able to almost double his resolution and get double the frame rate. It just doesn't make any sense. So there's definitely performance bugs here, and it's not just this guy that's had the problems. Exclusive Ace on Twitter had a similar thing. He's got a 3090 and an i9 10900K. That is stronger than my computer, and yet he's only getting 40 to 50 FPS, and I'm playing at a higher resolution than him. Something under the hood is seriously wrong, and that's just down to the developers. We've already had the NVIDIA patch that says, okay, we've optimized it for this. It's not that. It didn't really change much as far as I can tell. But here we are. People are just having issues that others aren't. And it's a problem because I can't really comment on it if I can't see it. And these kind of intermittent issues really are the worst to diagnose because it leads to a game that can get incredibly bad reviews. And you're just sitting here like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have those problems. And Battlefield made another mistake. They just decided to change too much. They saw what Warzone had done and what that had become. And they didn't realize that the reason Warzone's popular is not just because it's fun. It's because it's free. And so you can have that free-to-play model of operators and sell skins, and it's all fine. But then you want to bring it into a full-price game, and you ruin it. Because a lot of people, although I'm not that much against it, hate the operator system, and loads of the reviews bring up things like the operators. You say it's not done, wait a couple of months, it's incomplete, the movement and controls are poor. And I have to say, when I go into your settings page, and it's different than the beta, and it took me ages to set up the beta, now those controls are removed, and the movement system's different now than it was in the beta before, when the beta had good movement, it just blows your mind how they can go back and forth. And this is one of the issues. It feels like the game is still in development because it's just all over the place. There's no cohesive vision here. And you have to remember, this is a game where people literally just wanted Battlefield 4 with 128 players. It was the easiest win they could possibly have, which was why the hype was so massive. You thought no one could get this wrong because it was so easy. You'd already made the game once. Double the player count, increase the map size by maybe like 15 to 20%, and you are golden. And they just couldn't do it. Instead, what we had was EA bragging that Battlefield 6 is way ahead of schedule, it's so easy. And then soon later, there was a delay, and all the developers came out and went, well, we've been working from home. But for me, none of that really matters, because what a lot of other people think are major issues, I don't care about it that much. It is missing a scoreboard, and the squad screen sucks because it's clearly just never been made. But that's a peripheral issue to me. To me, the core of the game is flawed. The maps, they're truly awful when all they do is remind you of Windows Vista. Now, I have to say, since the launch of the game, Battlefield Direct Communication has actually been really good. They set this up because there was so much outrage, they didn't have much choice. They couldn't really stay silent because the pitchforks were at the door. And there actually already been 2 major patches, and they said there's going to be another one next week, which is even bigger. And what they're focusing on for the changes is actually what people care about. But I think this just goes to show that they probably knew that was already wrong and were working on it in advance. And if you know that something is wrong in advance, you really shouldn't release your game. I'm fed up of games releasing unfinished. I'm fed up of thinking they can get away with it and patching it later. And I'm fed up of the excuse. And I genuinely don't think that the owners of these companies actually understand the harm that they're doing to their sales, not just for this game, but for future games that you haven't yet released yet. This is a game which is literally being beaten in current player count by Team Fortress 2, a game which is basically older than binary code. And yet I'm sure that the head-ups will be going, oh no, we did everything right, we did our marketing just fine. But the thing is, I'm still happy that I bought the game, and the reason for that is because I enjoy Portal Mode, and Portal Mode is actually the responsibility of an entirely different company than the one that actually made Battlefield 2042, and they made it, apparently, according to one of the developers, in a year. I think that thing is a masterpiece. I think the work that they've done on that in a year is incredible, and they actually really pulled their finger out and made something solid in a very, very short amount of time. So I can't complain about that. It's the only thing which is really stopping me from completely ranting about the game, because no matter what they do to the main game, I've really got this for Bad Company 2 in the first place. But that's for me, and a lot of people are incredibly angry, and I think they have every right to. If you value the problems that they do, and you want to play the main game, they have absolutely every right, because every time someone comes out with a problem in the game, I agree with them. I just don't tend to rank it on the same level of seriousness as they do. So in the end, I think that the developers will eventually come out and fix the game, but I think it's going to be a very, very similar situation to what happened with Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 5. It just depends, because Battlefield 4 was released in a horrible state, and then over the course of 6 months to a year, it got fixed, and it was amazing, and the Battlefield community really looks back on that game with fondness. But Battlefield 5, even though they fixed all the problems, apparently, that never really took off, and that one died. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Battlefield 2042, because at the moment, its players are dropping off a cliff, and they're fixing it. But it remains to be seen whether this game will end up as the darling that we look back on and kind of overlooked launch issues, because that tends to be what happens to a Battlefield game, or whether it be Battlefield 5, and this will forever end up in the dumpster of just games that we really wish had never been made. But for now, that's it from me. If you like the video, press like and subscribe for more videos in the future, and let me know what you think of Battlefield 2042 and any other recent FPS that's been released. Are you a COD fan or a Halo fan? Which one do you think won this year? But for now, that's it from me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.